Hey guys, it's Chase again. So we've been talking about the temperaments a lot. We started with the Guardians and the Artisans, and today we're going to talk about my temperament, which is the intellectuals. Now, according to Plato, he called it the thinkers, but I don't think that's a fair label to use at all, because there's a stump there. It would have been great if I just wiped out right there on camera. Anyway, Plato used the term the thinkers to describe the intellectuals, and quite frankly, I don't think that's a fair way of putting it at all. Why is that? Well, because even some of the idealists or some of the artisans could be classified as thinkers because they use introvert thinking as their... Wow, it is really windy today. I like it. So, even some artisans and idealists use logic, or TI, for thinking. So they would technically be thinkers, right? That's why I don't like using the term thinker for the term intellectual for the temperament. So we're just going to use intellectual. So what is intellectual? Intellectual means future thinker, right? Intuitive thinker. NT for their letters, right? I'm going to go down this hill here. So NTs are future thinkers. They're people who focus on logic or rationale, but from the point of view of being objective, being theoretical, and always aware of the cutting edge, right? So these are the ENTJs, the ENTPs like myself, the INTJs, and the INTPs. All about basically processing their thinking towards what's possible, the what if, basically. What may happen, what might happen, being aware of all those possibilities. It's really where innovation comes out. Now, granted, idealists could innovate, and certainly artisans innovate all the time using their mechanical awareness. But when you combine mechanical awareness with innovation or theory, you get NTJs, ENTJs, and INTJs, right? Well, with let's change hands here. With NTPs, it's more of like, okay, well, where are we going? You know, where are we going as a species, or where are we going with a particular technology? Where are we going with this innovation? Right? It's more intrinsic instead of extrinsic, like it is with the NTJs. So, intellectuals as a temperament is very different from guardians or artisans. The reason for that is because guardians and artisans are pretty together, but intellectuals are not, actually. They're really split into two groups. Because you have taken SP, right, from artisans. They're very extroverted sensing oriented. They all have extroverted sensing in their top two cognitive functions, right? Or you look at SJs, they have introverted sensing in their top two cognitive functions. Not the case with intellectuals, though. That's not even remotely how it works. Because intellectuals could be SE users or SI users, or introvert intuition or extrovert intuition. Really, the only way to identify an intellectual is that they have introvert intuition or extrovert intuition in their top two cognitive functions, right? Whereas like an SJ, it's always introverted sensing, which is an introverted cognitive function, is in the top two functions, and that qualifies you as an SJ, right? Or with artisans, extroverted sensing and extroverted function. Top two functions makes you an SP or an artisan. Well, That gets really confusing when it comes to intellectuals. That's not the case. It could be an extroverted or an introverted cognitive function, but it has to be an intuitive one, right? So extrovert intuition or introverted intuition in their top two cognitive functions. That rule also applies to idealists, which is the fourth temperament that we'll be talking about in another video. So it becomes a little bit more complex to identify intellectuals, because intellectuals are focused on, intuiting the physical environment and the metaphysical environment, either or. And another interesting component about intellectuals is that each intellectual, their ego, as well as their shadow, also known as their unconscious mind, they're all intellectuals. They have an intellectual ego, they have an intellectual shadow. So I'm an ENTP, right? Well, I have an INTJ shadow. It's also intellectual. Again, it's different. Idealists have the same thing as well for their sides of their mind. So intellectuals, we focus on, the what if, what's possible. We take innovation very seriously, future-oriented, very future-oriented. The INTJ and the ENTJ specifically are all about what I want, whereas ENTPs, INFPs, we're all about, okay, what do we want? What is possible for us collectively, right? So that's the difference. That's really the main difference between the two subgroups of intellectuals that are out there. But how is this actually practical? Well, it really depends, because you have to look at their thinking functions as well, because they're NTs, right? So rationally speaking, NTJs focus on statistics. They're focused on money. They're very organized. I'm an ENTP. Let's be honest. I am extremely disorganized. Even though people comment all the time that I'm organized, not really. I've just learned to adapt with the fact that I'm the most disorganized, chaotic human being ever met. I mean, even at my last job, I was accused of being an agent of chaos, mostly because ENTPs are all about bringing about change. Of course, any NT is all about bringing about change, and change is everything, right? To an intuitive. Ideals prefer social change, but intellectuals prefer systemic change, because we're constantly aware of the what if, and then we start innovating and bringing ourselves to find out, okay, well, what's possible then, right? What is possible, and constantly testing the boundaries of what's possible. Without intellectuals, our race would have a lot more setbacks. Intellectuals really drive the bus for technology, system-oriented technology. There's a lot of social technology out there that idealists really dominate in their innovations, but every now and then an intellectual also comes up with a social technology, and there's various social media platforms out there that actually provide that. So like Facebook, for example, Mark Zuckerberg is definitely not an idealist. He's an intellectual. He's not Gandhi. Gandhi is an idealist, right? Steve Jobs, not an idealist. He's an intellectual. Steve Wozniak, he's an intellectual. Donald J. Trump is an intellectual. Everyone accuses him of being an ESTP. He's not. He's actually an ENTJ. But more on that later. We'll talk about typing VIPs or celebrities in some subsequent videos. So, anyway, that's basically what NTs are all about. They're all about innovation, being agents of change from a very process-driven, technology-driven perspective. uh, always constantly challenging the boundaries, challenging the rules, the what ifs, basically. What if could be accomplished? What could we accomplish? What can I accomplish? And yes, don't get me wrong, artisans can do that, but it's mostly based on the existing reality, changing reality as it already exists. An intellectual, however, is willing to actually add more to the existing reality that wasn't there before. Like, for example, the theory of relativity, what we know with physics, as well as the new physics, which is quantum mechanics, and my favorite, my very favorite one, which is the first law of quantum mechanics. If I observe a probability, then I actually make it more likely to occur, just based off of me observing that probability. All of those fields are intellectual fields that helped add to the human understanding of reality. An artisan is only really going to change, manipulate what's currently or already known about reality, and not so much actually add to the existing reality. It's like the difference between a handyman or an architect, right? The architect creates the entire plan for what's being built, and the handyman or the contractor or the builder is the person who actually builds that off of the plans, right? That's the difference between an intellectual and an artisan. Although don't worry, many artisans, especially ISTPs and ESTPs, would immediately disagree with me as a result of me saying that, but oh well. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, SE parent and SE hero definitely believes it can add to that reality, but quite frankly, it can't. Why? Because they're so focused on what everyone else is doing in order for them to know what they want, right? They're so focused on that. Whereas you get someone like me who's not really focused on what everyone else is doing. I'm only really focused on what I'm doing, and because of what I'm doing, other people want to do what I do, right? They want to have that experience, right? Or I see what other people want to do, I see their desires, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'd like to have that experience that you desire, right? And that's what fuels my form of innovation from a NTP point of view. If I was an NTJ, though, the other half of the intellectuals, it'd be very similar to how artisans work with by looking at what other people are already doing or looking at what's already done, right? But then figuring out a new way of doing it, right? A new way of a completely new approach that hasn't been done before. This could go back, you could go back to Henry Ford with this and just look at the advent of cars, right? And automobiles. That technology was as a result of an NTJ approach. That kind of level of innovation. So, anyway, that's NTs, or intellectuals in a nutshell. The future thinkers. They're very rare. They make up 15% of the population, compared to the sensing majority, which is 70% of the population, 40% guardians, 30% artisans. And you have people, especially SPs, because SPs are constantly competing with NTs all the time, NTJs. SPs either want to be with NTs, or they want to be just like NTs, or they go out of their way to see themselves as superior to NTs. So there's always that chance for competition always present with them, right? Well, they win in some areas, and in a lot of ways they lose in some other areas too. Again, no one type or no one temperament is better than another. It's just that we're different, and because we're so different, we have a right to be different. I remember many times being bullied, especially by SPs, because they thought I was weird. Well, of course they think I'm weird. My type is only 3% of the population. So they have that sensing bias. Oh, I'm a sensor. I make up 70% of the population, so my opinion is more valued than yours. Ooh. Yeah, no, that's not actually how it works. In reality, Mr. SP, you're just ignorant. And not really willing to have an open mind that someone is different than you for a reason, okay? And think about it. Could our race really survive with 70% of the world being intellectuals? I mean, that's not going to work. Someone's got to build the boats, right? Someone's got to build the houses. Someone's got to build all this stuff. Someone's got to protect it, right? The Guardians, that's what they do. They protect things. And Artisans, they build things, right? So there's a reason why the temperaments are distributed the way they are. It's for the sake of our race's survival. The collective unconscious of man, of our race, is very aware of that sensitivity. Why? Well, because our mind, collective mind, has adapted to the harsh environment provided by the earth. In order to do that, it's made sure that our temperaments are balanced in such a way so that, mentally speaking, we have what we need to survive as a race. So again, that doesn't just give any SP or SJ an excuse to point out the intellectual and say, well, you're weird, or there's something wrong with you, or maybe you're autistic, right? Which, for example, INTJs are considered to be very autistic. The entire label of autistic, at least in current days, and not what it was 15, 20 years ago, is the INTJ type. INTJs are more likely to be labeled, especially since they're 1% of the population, they are more likely to be labeled autistic, even though they aren't. They're just being INTJs, right? That is ridiculous, but that just shows you how stupid our bias is, how ignorant people really are, especially that 70% sensing majority that our society is based on right now and structured and organized by, right? So, again, that's another reason why I'm even bothering to do this, is to raise awareness about this fact that people, especially in the medical field, are being mistreated and misdiagnosed specifically because of a bias against their cognition, against their nature, against their very human soul, right? So that's why we have to be aware of these temperaments. Sure, you need to know these temperaments so that you can learn how to type someone on the fly, but they go so much deeper than that, right? So anyway, that's my little rant, because I'm in the minority, the 15% minority of intellectuals, and part of the 30% minority of intuitives, right? So anyway, that's what the NTs are: future thinkers, innovative, the what if, what's possible, what may come, how can I change things systematically or systemically to better myself or the race, and to take us all to the next level of civilization. Intellectuals really represent what it means to be on the cutting edge. So anyway, if you found this video useful or helpful or educational, please hit like or subscribe. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave it in the comments. I'll be happy to answer your questions whenever you have the inclination to ask. So anyway, you all have a good day, and I'll talk to you later.